Okay, we're good to go.
Thanks, John. Okay, we'll get this started. Stacy, if you want to introduce all your people, want everybody to stand up and introduce who we are, we can do that. Or not, well, just say who we are. What you do.
First of all, again, thank you for inviting us to this tradition. We thing for our community to see that we come together to collaborate and to work on issues facing us. So thank you for the invitation. I'm Stacey Myers, and I currently serve as the president of the Red Cross.
Jamie Benson, School District Superintendent.
I'm Alan Tuckatagan, and I'm the clerk of the school board, and I'm also a member of the board of directors for the State School Board Association.
Mike Miller, the treasurer of our tree.
I'm sitting over for
Allison Page, school board member.
We have two members who weren't able to be with us today, Bob Casey and Lindsay Cummings.
Sean Downing, City Council, District 1.
Alyssa Miller, City Council, District 3, and Jamie, I would recognize your voice before I recognize you. It's children. Yeah, it's children. Diana Dean, the person that purchased.
Nick Carroll, District 2, State Council. I'm Scott Simpson, the City Administrator.
Jeff Bjork, Alderman at large.
Scott Worthett, currently serve as Council President.
Dan Tolman, Mayor of Falls.
Bierstead, council member, District 4.
Okay, great. Then appreciate you guys coming and joining us with us tonight and go over some stuff. I don't know, Scott, if you want to start us off with city updates.
Sure, we'll try to run through. We tried to lower Councilman Bjork's expectations of how many minutes you all have to just have open chat. But we'll try to get you to the sum of that. We'll try to run through prepared presentations, understanding that I'm not pausing very much for my explanation. We're just trying to run through some high-level stuff, and then certainly if there's questions, we'd be happy to take them. Understanding that after each gives their how superintendent and I discussed it, we each try to give our presentations going. There might be some clarifying questions. Then once we get to have a chance to talk about our collaborations and our commissions, then there's some discussion time. So we do our best to stick on the agenda that we have. So some city updates I'm happy to provide. So what we'll run through. Housing first. So 770 housing units are approved or under construction since 2021. So it seems like there's a lot that is. We have done a housing study twice, housing needs assessment in 2018, and we did it again in the fall of 2022. Unfortunately, we had a very low vacancy rate in the 2018 study of 1.2%, which is reasonably unhealthy for a housing market. You want to be in the maybe 5% vacancy to give people some ability to move around in units and from one type of housing to the other. And actually in the fall of 22, when they did the survey, we were down to less than 1% vacancy rate. So critically low. And that also included the anticipated units that were under construction at the time that could be occupied with this. So you see the breakdown of the types. I did want to just read a couple of things. I think I'm guessing that our city planner English is responsible for this good prose here, but I thought it gave a good summary of what ecosystem looks like. So one of the key takeaways I guess we'd like to share with this board, and we have shared with the community, is that housing markets an ecosystem where the amount of one type of housing affects others. So we might often hear somebody say, well, we need more workforce housing, we need more senior housing. That's correct. All of those housing types impact one another. For example, a senior citizen might be renting a market rate unit, a rental unit, due to lack of senior housing. Plus, a market rate renter may be unable to find a unit despite our studies saying that we built enough market rate. So people don't fit neatly into these housing categories, even though the categories are easy to monitor and look at data. And then people live in units that are available and economically feasible, so they, you know, there's some natural tendencies to things like families going to multi-bedroom places. But when push comes to shove and people are looking for housing, they'll go where something is available and economically feasible. Furthermore, the creation of new units of all kinds has a ripple effect in the market. So an individual lives in an affordable unit and has more money to spend on housing due to a raise or new job, would be tempted to leave their current housing if new market rentals were built. So there's things not happening because of people's concern about what's available or leaving something known, even if they may be a traditional move-up type buyer. And this in turn would open up another unit of affordable housing back up. So in some cases, we have families that can well afford to move up. Their unit would be classified as affordable or workforce, but they're not leaving that housing just because of their uncertainty about what the next step might be for them, interest rates and other things. So this is a complex mix of things. We did want to also mention that there's this thought that there's all of these new people coming, that every new unit is some new family or some new entrant into the community. This is just above anecdotal level data. So a survey of a newly built multifamily complex in River Falls on the west side found that 32% already had a River Falls address before moving into those units. I know because I looked at the drill down data on that because we also had employment data where they were working, and that particular unit had River Falls police officer, new school district teachers. So even if their address was somewhere other than River Falls, they were moving here for employment within River Falls. So it's not that a lot of people are moving here to community cities, although that's certainly still a significant amount of people in town. And you just want to, a lot of these units are people within that ecosystem moving around. So we talked about the shortage of housing, and we're trying to work on this. Council's given us some tools to try to work significantly. As in the past, we've had growth in north, south, east, and west. We're starting to see the completion of pretty significant 2000s annexations, Sterling Pond, Tiny Meadows, South Point. Those three large annexations that were in the early 2000s, they now are reaching their completion. There likely won't be any lots in those three subdivisions after 2020. They'll be complete. So we're starting to see additional interest now in additional areas of development, including some good potential for infill development, which is helpful. We already have infrastructure. Mann Valley Corporate Park continues to be one of the focuses that council's asked us to spend our time on. We have recently approved the construction contracts for water, sewer extensions and some additional road, as well as stormwater. We also completed acquisition of property. Mr. Gary Molter, that will accommodate the lift station and road improvements. And we continue to have discussions about this plan moving forward and significant interest. We are going to, one highlight just there is the lot. The yellow, the brighter yellow along the green greenery there, that is an area the city is planning to do a housing RFP for in the fall. So we are going to seek proposals from housing developers to add some housing in that area. That's part of the master plan for the Mann Valley area. This is the utilities that we discussed. So we have.
Can we see this? Where does the school district go?
School district is the darker gray.
The darker gray. That's what I thought. So that darker gray, the lower gray.
That's the 37.6 acres that's marked as the institution.
Okay. Thanks.
And so then we show Mann Valley Park infrastructure. It is going to seem like every speck of dirt and dust on the site is going to be moved. That is not a complete exaggeration. There's a lot of community work to accomplish this, including some significant excavation for water and sewer main. This does include extension of water main from the DeSantis Park area all the way through the W River Falls farm, all the way up to Paulson Road, Radio intersection. So very significant. Sewer is a little bit lesser. The sewer is kind of running across the Mann Valley farm and then down through back to the DeSantis Park. And then also some sewer there going east. And we appreciate the cooperation with the school district to work on some easements to get those utilities. Oh, this will also include approximately 2 miles of multi-use path. So essentially, path from DeSantis Park, eventually all the way up Radio Road. The existing off-road trails that are being constructed right now on Paulson Road. So that'll provide a connection to the Sterling Ponds neighborhood and also back into the downtown by south of the highway. Another big project that I think you're all aware of, so I won't spend too much time, is the Kinni Corridor implementation. We have invited the United Army Corps of Engineers to work on a plan with us. They're doing the feasibility and those dates. There is an August 15th open house at the library that we've invited all of the, I think we sent emails to all the people that were on the original contract this week, which was 5 cents. So October will kind of be the Army Corps telling us which plan they think they're going to select, and then the study will be complete in July. Lots of highlights on development. I won't go through every one of these, but we have really seen development in every category. So industrial, commercial, multifamily, single-family residential are the kind of categories. And there's also been some really good institutional projects with churches and school district and CBTC, and then UWRF with the Sci-Tech building. So there's a fair amount of demolition occurring in the community right now. There's also significant construction. I don't know if you have any questions about specific projects that are up there. State budget update. One thing that Superintendent talked about, sharing information on kind of what the results of that were. So as we understand Act 12, we now are shifting to a state shared revenue program that's dependent largely on the growth of sales tax revenue in the state. That will provide, as the laws are in an annual index based on what the sales tax does statewide. There is some restrictions on the use of that money, but we spend plenty on public works and public safety, parts of transportation that we expect to spend, overspend our shared revenue. So we did fare well. An additional $500,000 is estimated for 2024 shared revenue.
What do you get? What did you get last year?
So about 1.9 is where we started. So we'll be up to about 2.4 shared revenue.
And does that come to you from the state and from the aid, or do you like
That comes in the form of aid from the state. So that'd be income tax and sales tax collected at the state level, shared with locals. We don't have, Wisconsin has limited abilities of option taxes for cities, and so that was the up back in 2011. They'll do the collecting and the share. Until 2024, the sharing was frozen, but actually reduced dollars for the last 20 years. So this is a pretty significant thing for all cities and buildings across the state. Personal property taxes were eliminated as of January 2024. I wanted to note that because you were also a benefactor of some of the levy from that in the school district. For us, it's going to be between 100. I think the newly revised number is closer to 150,000, but it could be as much as 150,000 in lost revenue. So there's some netting. There's been a promise that cities are going to be whole, but there's no language in the law that explains exactly how that's going to happen. So it's possible they just say you've got an extra $500,000, you should work about the 150 or loss. So we're still working through that issue with the state. There is of interest. There's the innovation grants that are available. They're primarily aimed at counties and municipalities, but the school district potentially have a hand in that. If cities or counties cooperate with other units of governments or school districts, I think there's even some abilities with nonprofits, demonstrate some cost savings or some consolidation or some sharing of services, we would be eligible for additional funding through what they call innovation grants. And you can see the categories of what that would be. So sports, communication, IT, etc.
So something like developing the school forest property, doing some work out there could potentially be fall into that category?
If we were doing the work already with you and we found a way to do it for less, then it probably would fall in that category. More likely for us in cooperation would be if we decided community ed and community recreation that there was some overlap or some savings, administration, staffing, then they calculate how much we would save and they're providing that in a grant for that program. So it's like most things from the state. We see it on paper first. We want to see what they're doing. But I note it because it is a significant amount of funding available to cities that we need to understand exactly.
It's the intent of it is to encourage school districts, municipalities, whatever, to work together, to collaborate. So let's say if we were going to merge our library systems.
Yes, I think the primary interest of the legislators who wrote it was that if there are multiple civilians, fire stations, and others within our area, they would collaborate. Or 911 calls centers. But when they wrote the language, they made it much more expansive. So yes, a shared, the public library and grade school library collaborate and staffing is likely to be eligible under this new program, but we have no idea who's going to subscribe or who's are. So I think just a note more than anything on the school board, there isn't any discussions I'm having with the superintendent about what we can do together for us yet.
I propose that the city's in charge of determining all books that are on all shelves.
So that was our quick run through. I don't know if there's additional clarifying questions. I can answer those or
Scott, you mentioned something about looking at new areas. I'm assuming that involves annexing the areas to the housing development.
It most likely does. We have some infill areas within the city that would make some sense, but largely it includes annexation because the amount of open space already annexed aside from Mann Valley is limited.
And annexation would go what direction?
Well, annexation is a factor of willingness to settle, economics, and development. So my guess is that there would be continued pressure north, south, east, and west. It's becoming difficult topography-wise to go south and west because of the river. So there's some probably limited annexation in that direction, but the other three directions it's really up to the private landowners what their interest and willingness to do this.
You go back to this slide here. Sure. I'm trying to get my bearings on our property, on the school district property. Because I'm drawn to that.
So your property comes down to division.
Yeah.
It's got this length. I don't know what the scale is here. Looks like
Is that Gerald Service?
maybe 300 feet, and then all of this area here.
Right.
The city did purchase
Okay, so
this farmhouse farm.
We did.
We also have purchased a significant amount of land over here with the road and that. So the city owns essentially all of this that's shown, with the exception of this privately owned lot now. And so we're your neighbors on, this is the Kohler's property up here, and then school district, and then the city is the neighbor on this side.
Where does Gerald's house sit in that gray, Nick? No.
It's right about here.
Okay.
This is the dry run-ish area.
So is the pink line the multi-use trail, is that the easement that we just?
This is the easement area, yes.
Thank you.
Reason I ask about what direction the city may go and how the city impacts us, if we decide we're gonna go with Fifth Elementary School, it's some 10 to 20 years, where would that be? It's a guess right now, but it's, you do give us, fact that it's south and west of Big House Road. So it could be.
Yeah, the topography is the limits that practicality of development that way. There's still pretty significant ability to go east, due east. There's River Falls Golf Club, which is undetermined what the future will be of that. And then so you can go east, northeast, and you can go east, southeast. You probably can go southeast, although there may at some point there's some practical limits for what the super.
We'd probably be more north, like Sterling Pond's neighborhood.
Yeah, I think it just depends on, it's really going to depend on the interest and willingness of the landowners, because we're not in a situation where there's only one parcels to develop. So that'll have an impact on the privately owned coverage to say, well, you just keep paying number one, and so there's a bit of shopping that occurs. But as you saw, the Thompson property just recently sold and annexed. So there's other properties like that that are still pretty getting close to the city and don't really suggest much extension. And then we have a boundary with the town of Kinni. So that provides some more certainty to people and the school board about where the growth would be. And it's frankly one of the advantages of boundary agreements is so that other agencies like the school board can plan services because they kind of city would grow, density would be. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't rule out any direction other than maybe south. Mr. Superintendent.
Okay, no PowerPoint, no additional handout other than get to the second item on the agenda. School district. Have an enrollment projection. I'll try to keep that simple by giving you a one-page, double-sided, gives you at least a summary of a 40-page document. But before talking about enrollment, first item on our agenda, the referendum plan options. And so we've been doing what I guess I'll call a slow rollout in communicating with the public that we, like 84% of the districts in the state of Wisconsin, faced with the need for us to go to our community and ask for an operational referendum support. And at the same time, we've done a comprehensive facility study working with the architect firm and construction management firms. We've done a formal assessment. Board seated a committee, a project oversight committee that's taking this massive comprehensive facility study and basically boiling it down to identify what some key priorities would be. We're putting together a survey that will get rolled out to the community second or third week of September. That survey is going to give a great deal of guidance to the board in determining how close are we with some things that we put in that survey that we're thinking about. Is the community going to tell us we're off our rocker? You keep talking about you don't have the tax tolerance for these kind of issues, or I think that we can support this. So whatever the survey results will then steer the board, that will have to, by early in December, pass a resolution by law that have to state the specifics of what will be on the ballot in the February referendum. So we're kind of in this fast track zone now where we got to make some decisions. We'll be ramping up that communication with the community, and the big jump start has to do with the community survey. So every survey like this, you try to educate people a little bit. Try to give a little bit of narrative to help them to understand the issues in case they might not fully understand them, and then you ask a couple of questions. And so what the school board is debating with right now is we have identified that our top priority would be one referendum question related to an operational referendum question, meaning we don't have the financial means to keep pace with inflation. We've hit the wall that 84% of the districts in Wisconsin have already hit in this last decade, where they too had to go to their communities and ask for an operational support, just basically pay our bills. Secondary question number 2 has to do with facilities. That's a separate question. You can't mix the two together. They're separate questions. So the survey results from the community will give, again, a great deal of guidance to the board to determine where we are with these 2 questions. The cause of all of this really is that the way schools are funded. You refer to some shared revenue law back in 1911. You trumped us on that one, but I can go back to 1993 when the school funding formula was created. And it basically, they took where your spending habits were at in 1993, and they developed this formula that says now you're going to be tied to that. We're tied to that today in 2023. That same 1993 formula doesn't work for us. So shame on the district in 1993 for being frugal in their spending habits. Here's an example for you how the formula works. We, this last year, received about $10,000 was the revenue limit that we could have. $10,000 per student. You maybe have heard that now with the legislative budget decision and the governor signing a bill that the lowest amount that any district can have is now $11,000. So for us, that sounds like some amazing news. So you're saying you used to get $10,000 and now you're getting $11,000 per student, and say, yep, that's true. But it's important to understand the whole story so that it doesn't sound like such a great gift, because while we don't look at the horse in the mouth, we are appreciative for the increase in funding. Previously, when we were at $10,000 per student, we were ranked 418th out of 421 districts in this entire state. Low revenue to operate our schools. Here's an example for you. Our neighbors to the north at Hudson, they have $12,500 per pupil. I think it might be more like $12,700 or $800 now. Where we made it all the way to 11,000. Yay, good for us. That formula, it is the way it is because of how it was created in 1993. So our neighbors to the north get to have $1,800 more for every kid they educate than we do. And we can't keep pace with inflationary costs. Among our many challenges are hiring and retaining high quality staff to keep our district at the high quality that we have a tradition and we're known for providing a pretty solid education to our kids. And to do that, you got to have the right people in front of those kids every day, and that's becoming a challenge for us. And so that's the cause for why we need to look at a referendum. Back to one more piece of the story related to, we used to get 10,000 and now it's 11,000. In the last 2-year biennial budget, the legislative cycle always runs in a 2-year cycle. So the last legislative cycle was 2021-22, 22-23. This is the last biennial budget cycle. They told school districts, the state legislature said, we are giving you this much money. We're giving you $0 increase per pupil because you got a whole bunch of federal COVID money, which is in part true. And we said, okay, we'll use that one-time money that the feds gave us to pay our bills, to give modest pay increases to staff, to keep pace with ongoing inflationary costs. We'll use that one-time money. We sure hope that you're going to make up for not giving us, for giving us $0 in that last biennial budget. And typically, the expectation, the habit, the tradition is that the legislature would give us about $200 increase per pupil in 1 year, and then about $200 increase in the second year for a total of $400 increase. So of this $1,000 bump they recently gave us, getting us up to $11,000, $400 of that is where they had to play catch up. Or we would have had a cliff spending this one-time federal money, so they had to make up for that. So there's $400 of that, and then if we would expect they would continue to give $200 per pupil in each of this year's biennial budget, this 2-year biennial cycle, expecting 200 and 200 again. Together, that makes 200, 200, 200, 200. There's 800 that you would normally expect. That doesn't help us financially. That didn't help us with the antiquated 1993 formula. That doesn't help to offset our deficit projections. We're appreciative that it's not worse, but just we're a little concerned as a district that there will be some misperceptions in our community about the fact that we used to be at 10,000, that low revenue limit piece, and suddenly we've gone to 11, and there will be a perception that all of our budget woes have been solved, and that's just simply not the case. We continue to see a deficit on the horizon, and that horizon is 24, 25. So for this year, we're going to be fine to run a balanced budget this school year. Next year, which is why we're going to a referendum in February, we're saying we're running out of money. Be $1 million short next year in 24, 25. In the following year, we're going to be $2 million short. In the following year, we're going to be $3 million short. Easy numbers to memorize. That's the pace that we're looking at with our current deficit projections. So we're looking at an operational referendum question that would help to address that, and debating at the same time, what are we going to do with our facilities? And a secondary question, the community survey is going to help the board make some of those decisions moving forward. Board resolution I mentioned would be in December, because by law they have to do that, I think it's 70 days prior to the election date, referendum date. So we have to be now and December to get that survey done, get the results back, make some decisions, and then we obviously ramp up our marketing campaign and the communication plan with the public leading up to that February referendum date, holding listening sessions, create a video to kind of help tell our story, having dialogue with community members and helping people make an educated vote when they do vote in February. We like to remind people that a school board doesn't determine the outcome of a referendum, nor do administrators. The community is going to decide whether they think we're really in need of some financial support. They're going to decide whether they think they can afford to pay a couple $100 more on a property tax bill to support those needs. It'll be the community's choice. But it's our job to educate them so they can make an informed decision when they go to the February ballot and cast their vote.
Jamie, if I could just, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of, Scott, when you mentioned that this increase in state aid that's coming to you is coming from statewide resources, for us, a significant part of this, what you're going to hear about the huge increase in education this year. A good share of it is in our ability to increase our taxing authority and property taxes. So it's not coming from the state, it'll come locally here. So it'll be our ability. So you're going to hear how much more the River Falls District got, but a good share of that's going to be a raise in the mill levy here to get that money. So it's not all coming from the state.
Yeah, and so just for clarification on that too, so the council you're used to us talking about levy caps. So we have a cap on our levy the school district has a cap on their revenue. Whatever revenue doesn't come from the state or other sources, then they are allowed to that revenue cap to levy, which that changes their levy. Ours is, I would say the opposite, because it's not really what the equivalent is. We have a levy cap, so if we get additional revenue from the state, we still can't increase our spending above the cap. So in some ways that could reduce the levy taxes, so we could have an opposite impact. Because we don't necessarily increase that levy. Ours is hard on the actual amount we can tax people. Theirs is firm on the amount to the school district. Yeah, they have the same kind of format.
We get our money from two sources. We get them from property taxes and we get state aid. But there is a limit. There's a cap. We call it the revenue cap limit. You can only, and so depending on how much aid they give us, how much financial aid, then the remaining piece, to Scott's point, goes to the property taxpayers. And that's different in all the districts across the state of Wisconsin. If you're property rich, if you are getting educated in Door County, they're going to get a small amount of state aid, and the burden is heavier on local property taxes. We're in the middle. We're about 50-50 when it comes to about 50% revenue from state aid and about 50% from local property taxes. So the only way that we can exceed the cap is through a referendum. The vote is to say, okay, I'm willing to exceed the cap, and I understand in doing so that it may have an impact on my property taxes.
And that's the same mechanism for us too, only with yours with the revenue cap, ours is the levy cap. So the city council can go to referendum, which many cities are doing across the state because of a lot of untitled issues. Even like increased aids, they spend times federal money on added positions and other things, and now they're having to operate. Or there's some cases, especially in public safety, ambulance in particular, because they can't levy enough money to pay for the service. So that was one of the reasons we tried to have that law. What we saw coming down.
And most of the districts in the state have passed these referendums, and that's why we've been kind of stuck with them.
And it really impacts us when we are looking at attracting and retaining the best teachers. Because there are fewer people going into education in the first place. And then when there are districts that are above our 418 position, they already have more resources to be able to pay teachers. And then if they pass an operating referendum, then they have even more options. And so this is a significant issue in terms of being able to maintain excellence in teaching.
I think the positive thing in River Falls, Wisconsin is that this community has a long and strong history of supporting the public education system. And there's a lot of support in this community for the public education system and all the good things that we as a community do for our kids. So that's the good news. So we're very hopeful that we'll go out with a really good plan for the future and that it will get supported.
And we're working hard to come up with that. We've done a lot of research, a lot of thinking on it.
So is your levy 10 years long? Do you guys have a 10-year operating levy? How long are the levies for?
It's annual. Our levy gets tweaked a little bit. Once this first step is the state tells us how much aid we're going to get.
Yeah.
Then Lynette, should have introduced Lynette, business manager for the district, joined us in January. Gets out her calculator and says, okay, here's how much money the state is giving us in aid. We know what the cap is, and they're giving us this much in aid, therefore that means the rest will go back out on the property tax.
But you're
Sorry,
you're
I'm
asking
It's
about-
recurring.
right.
The one in seven. Yeah.
How
Oh,
already-
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
When we look for an operating referendum, so we could make two choices. We could make it for a specific length of time, so it would last for 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. The challenge with that is then when it ends, a school board is perpetually in the process of selling on, which I will tell you takes a tremendous amount of work, especially for our administrators. So our intent we think right now is that we prefer the idea of a recurring referendum, even though we know it would be recurring at a level that will still put us in deficit spending by the time we get to that old steady. But at least it buys us some time to be able to see, is there a change in this funding level? Will there be other ways for us to use it?
Our survey may or may not clarify this, but I think it's fine to talk about it publicly. You can tell anybody you want about what I'm going to say, which is right now the plan for the operating question on the ballot would be, we're asking you to support 1 million in year one. I just mentioned that's a deficit. That's what the next, and 2 million in year two, and a 3 million in year three, and then it plateaus. Then it just stays at 3 million. So I consider it's like we're kind of splitting the baby. That we're really saying we want this to be recurring, but we know the tax tolerance isn't going to be there for us to say, and then 4 million, and then 5 million, and then 6 million.
Well, and something might change at the state.
And things could change. Enrollment could spike on that housing. But would you bring more kids? Because we'll talk about that in a minute. That with all of your housing development, with our city's housing development, we're not yielding a whole lot of kids. We'll get into that in a minute. The split the baby theory is that buy ourselves a little time, it gets us for sure to the promised land for 3 years. Maybe enrollment increases, maybe state aids change. A whole lot of things can change legislatively. It's a good compromise that I also consider the teeter-totter in decision making is whatever you ask for with the operational amount, as well as a facility ask, the teeter-totter is, well, what's the tax tolerance? What are people willing to pay? You got to find, the board has to find the right balance here. You cannot ask for the sun and the stars, because it is not going to fly. So we're trying to take a very modest, responsible, measured approach, and we're going to outline what we think some of this modest, reasonable approach is in a community survey, and then we're going to find out if people think we're off a rocker, or if they're saying, yeah, I'm beginning to understand, and I think I could support that. We'll see what the survey tells us. Enrollment projections, we really appreciate the help that you provided to the demographer that tapped on your shoulder of the city to get some housing and development trend data, which helped them, along with some other things. They look at birth rates and all kinds of other factors to help look into the crystal ball, help us look at the crystal ball for enrollment. Soundbite from me would be, we anticipate modest enrollment growth. That being said, our 3 largest class sizes are sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So we're going to continue. Last year I said it was our largest classes were freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. All the students are not graduating. A smaller 8th grade class plunked into 9th grade. So as these 3 largest classes graduate over the next 3 years, seniors, juniors, and sophomores, we're not replacing the other end of the pipeline in kindergarten. We're not bringing in big numbers. So we're graduating more out, bringing fewer in. But there's some growth going on in the community that there is going to still be some move-ins. And so I use the phrase that our demographer says we're going to see modest growth. I gave you that handout, and I think on there somewhere it says between now and 2032, we're going to grow by 417 total students. It doesn't kind of break that down where we're going to see the most significant increase is going to kind of restart. We're going to start seeing our elementary numbers start to go up. And not so much at our middle school and high school. And again, this is crystal ball. The demographer, they're good at what they do. They have worked, their resume is long and it's deep, and they work with many districts in Wisconsin. They're good at what they do, but it's not always an exact science. So I alluded to earlier that can you do something about bringing more kiddos with all of this housing development? We are yielding for a single family home. We're yielding about a half of a student for every house that goes up. And all of these apartments, records are true, there aren't kids in those apartments. The yield rate is, I have it here somewhere, it's less than, actually, there's college parties going on. The yield rate at the multifamily units is 0.17 students per unit. So, and Scott, you mentioned too that some of the new house goes up. Who moves into it? Somebody that already lived here. Who would they sell their house to? Somebody that already lived here. It doesn't produce more kids. So there's these anomalies that you were mentioning, some other things that the whole housing thing is a little bit quirky to draw a direct correlation and assume that with all these apartments going up that we ought to be seeing a boom in students. That is not the case. Not at all. In a nutshell, without getting in too deep on the weeds with the yield ratios, that's kind of a thing that I personally am most interested in from all of this Demographer Study is because then I can go to Scott and say, can you tell me, give me some housing data, will you? Tell me how many permits you're selling. Not a demographer by trade, but I can do some simple math to try to look at the yield rate. And have this many houses coming in, and that's what the demographer has done. And we work with Scott. I have those conversations with Scott 3 times a year. We're going to keep looking at it.
How does your demographic data look compared to other comparable districts or is it similar? I mean,
We're not declining, which is really important.
right, I know, but it's like, okay, where are the kids?
That's the big question, is where'd the kids go?
I mean, there may be fewer of them.
Hudson's got significant, a big decline here in the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Virtual schooling has grown in the last, I could easily say the last decade. More and more parents and students are deciding, I'm going to go to school in McFarland. I live here in town. I'm going to hop on my computer. I'm going to attend the virtual school out of students.
One of the challenges with early elementary students especially is trying to find them. Because I think there was probably a time when the school district might have relied on the births at the hospital. You can't do that anymore. They could be having their kids anywhere around here, and families can open enroll now and all of that. So until they show up at our doorstep, it's hard to get those numbers sometimes. And you can't count kids that ain't been born yet. So, and that's only 5 years out, 4 years out. So
You shouldn't compare T-ball. 3-year-olds and teenagers, but that's done over time.
So you brought up an interesting note there, said open enrollment. Do we have any idea how many students in this school district open enroll outside of River Falls and how many come into River Falls?
Yeah, I should have those numbers memorized, and to be honest, I don't.
Do we have more coming in?
Yeah, we do. We do. Pretty easy application process. Here's a little bragging comment. Patting our teachers and school board on the back. Today, again, as I often read, anytime a parent student fills out an open enrollment request to either come into our district or to leave, there's a place that says, why do you want to do this? And they have to type their why. Often, today I got one, they want to come in, and it's because their kiddo is in high school and they know that their current high school, I won't name the district that is close to nearby us, does not have the same course offerings that our high school has. But there are more opportunities. I want my kid to have these kind of opportunities offered in Falls. Those are the kind of things that guess what's going to happen if we get that referendum. We can't have all of those things.
Yeah, and I appreciate, your numbers trying to find kids that are going to be coming into the school district. Those numbers are getting lower. When you think since 2020, right, or so 3-4 years now, in the state of Wisconsin, there's been more deaths than there have been births, right, each of those years. And then you look at the percentage of kids that are 400, that just keeps on shrinking. So there's not, in what we're building here,
those are, they tend to be what's happening around the country where somebody's moving into a two-bedroom apartment, but there's only one person in it because they want their storage room, but they're not going to have kids. What is it? 57% of the Wisconsin population is over 55 or over 50. So
Our demographer, this is public record apparently, our demographer sent letters out to anybody here in the River Falls School District that bought a new home and asked them a handful of questions. How old are you? Do you have any kids?
Yep.
Did you already live here? Or where did you come? Guess what that survey said? Many of them were not going to have children, 25 plus years old. Many of them already lived here if they did have kids. The more evidence of this movement within the housing trend is not yielding piles and piles of kids. That I was very, very, very curious when I knew ahead of time of all of the apartments that were going to be built. How many units have been built in the last 4 years? 3 years.
Yeah.
Hundreds.
All the vendors going through hundreds. So
I was knowing that, Scott telling me, this is what's coming. Very, very curious to see. Again, that's going to bring kids.
Yeah.
That bring kids.
well, that's
0.17 per unit.
But on a very positive note, River Falls, Wisconsin, we're part of the East Metro. We're in the East Metro growth bubble. This town isn't shrinking. It's not like in some communities in northern Wisconsin. They're seeing such decline. We're having to close elementary schools, and that's not happening here. We might see a little bit slower growth than we've been used to, but River Falls, Wisconsin is a good place.
well, you guys are right. That's a great example. Their population has been growing, but their school district has been vacant for what, 6 years or more?
Yeah.
7 years. And they have all these apartments going up, and
Yeah.
there's not kids in those.
There's 431 school districts in Wisconsin. The vast majority of them are declining enrollment. Average size of school district in Wisconsin is about 1,000 students, so it makes us one of the biggest school districts, bigger school districts in the state. However, there's a lot to think of, as Alice was saying here. We're bringing a town to raise kids, and that's why we're concerned. We're not looking at or expecting big growth. We don't want to be heads. Just so let's add that tagline to a whole bunch of things. You don't want to be heads, so that we're a district that's growing and got a lot going for it. People don't want to bring their kids there. So I think that there's a lot to hope for that this community will continue to support education and be a great place to raise.
Looking at the clock, you want me to roll into this quick school board's brief update?
yeah, and I think just as a heads up, what staff will do, what I'll volunteer our staff to do is work with the school board to come up with a report on collaborations so we can give that its due, but I don't suspect we'll have time today to talk.
Yeah, no, I'll try to be quick and brief. I think if you have some interest and so on, the school forest has received a lot of momentum in the last couple of years. We were blessed with the Kinni Corridor trust. They made a purchase of an access road in an adjoining 40 acres. That 40 acres happens to be between city property and our properties. This new access road opened a whole new door for us to gain access to our previously landlocked school forest. So quick progress there is that we've had some amazing volunteers that have done a lot of work to help, more work to be done in clearing and improving some of the existing trails. That access road needs a lot of work in order for us to be able to drive a bus down that road and drop kids off, which we did this spring for the first time that I'm aware of ever. We had over 1,000 kids out in that place with 15 different field trips that took place this year. Very excited about opportunities that lie ahead. We received an $18,000 grant from Pierce County. We have yet to use that money, but we intend to take a piece of our property, which we call the prairie, and there is an existing trail in that prairie that provide access to all facilities, in part using some of the money from the Pierce County grant. We're working with Rotary on a potential partnership. Someday have a facility out there that is again that'll be on a community survey, a question about whether or not you think we ought to make an investment in that. Facility and restrooms improvement to the road to be able to get all the way back and do a bus turnaround. You don't want to see how we did that this year. We did it safely, but Scott, your staff has really been helpful. Mike Noreen, big shout out. There's a couple of interns that have helped us on a few things with that school forest project. And I'll mention too how appreciative the district is moving away from the school forest. Just some quick thank yous that you've been so generous as a council and as a city to allow us to move the Ren students into the old police station. That's a big deal. We were in a bad spot, and we really appreciate that. I believe Scott and I have a very good relationship. We communicate often. We both understand and feel good personally and know that both the board and the council and our community love to see whenever we can collaborate and help each other. It's a good use of company tax dollar. It shows a little common sense in government. And we're just fortunate. Lastly, on a personal level, I know I'm awful proud of this city. You guys run a good show. Our park and rec programs and the beauty of this city and all that it has to offer wouldn't happen without your leadership. You're making big decisions every day, and I recognize and appreciate the work that you're all doing. And that means all of the staff here as well.
I want to make sure that we thank you for when we just use it for a report to the school liaison officer. I think if people were only listening to the reports that often come across from our country, there'd be many people who would not think that this is a good initiative. I would maintain that if every school district had the kind of police liaison officers that we do, they would have a very different perspective. This is an incredible collaboration that we have between the school district and the city council. Thank you. They do prevention, they develop relationships, they reach out and just make life better for an awful lot of kids, which means life is better for families. And so they do an excellent job. We're just grateful for your participation.
Just as an aside, Chris and Brian gave their reports to the board, their annual report. And I mentioned to Chris, because it occurred to me when he was talking,
Chris Godfredson, SRO.
so. And Chris has been doing this for 15 years. That means for the last 3 years. And those two guys are both always at graduation, on duty, helping with security, all kinds of stuff in there. And they're great. The last 3 years, Chris has been there, those seniors walking across the stage. He first met him as kindergarten. And talk about relationships and those kinds of things that just work. The key to having good SROs in any school district out there is preventative. And if the work can be preventative, which, you know, we've got a great police force here, and I think that shows up to those two guys that are buildings and makes a good impression on the students. So we really appreciate that collaborative stuff. And I can tell you, the potential for us in any school district in this country to have an active shooter, we know that those are the two guys who are going to be running into the building, not running out of the building. And for our kids, it helps us a lot, it helps the families and kids here too.
Well said. I guess ditto. Our understanding, and a consistent understanding I have from the city council is that the expectation is collaboration. So we try to get to yes. With virtually any request that we get from the school district, and I believe that we've been able to have a similar relationship with requests that we make on them. We'll have some challenges over time because things change and organizations change. And seen a lot of changes in associations, volunteer groups, and their demands at the schools, at the city are different than what they ever were. And so we'll continue to. I think we'll have to continue to monitor this shared facilities agreement that we have because there seems to be a lot of people nudging and moving and trying to change the order of things. People are requesting city facilities and trying to jump ahead of school district activities and vice versa. So that's something I think just keep on the radar.
So you are gonna build a nice big rec center, and we don't have to worry about that.
Pickleball courts, pickleball courts. So just that's something for the boards and the council to keep in mind, but it isn't a urgent or critical thing right now, but just the youth sports and other things that put a lot of pressure on our relationship because we're used to kind of just working with each other. And now there's all kinds of players that I don't know, I have the same appreciation for the long relationship we have with each other. So that means they might not get to use the high school field when they want because Park and Rec already has something on it, or they can't use a city facility because the school district already has. You were next in line for all of our facilities. So that's been really helpful, and I think it's saved the money. We have a pretty hard stop at 6:15 typically, but I guess I don't. Your council or school trustee for discussion.
I just have some, I have no idea where this is going, so just go with me. But Diane and I were just talking about this, and we have these innovation grants, which I have no idea if this would even work. But one of the big issues, and I know that you guys know this, is how expensive it is to have children right now. So currently, we have 3 children who are 8 and 10. And we have 8-year-old twins, if that just gets confusing. And we spend over $2,000 a month to send them to Kids Club, which is fantastic because that's actually much less expensive than other options that we have in the area. But still, for most families, that is really a tough pill to swallow when it's more than a mortgage to just provide childcare during the summer. So one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about this, and I know that when I hear younger people talking about having children, I think here in River Falls, is there a way for the city and the school district to collaborate? There's not adequate childcare. There's not adequate affordable childcare. And so for people to have children here, or this is anywhere right now, having that ability to have childcare, because most families have to be a two-parent working family. Is that something that we can collaborate on? I don't know. That's why I'm looking at this innovation grant going, does this even work? But something where I think recognizing from both the city perspective, we're talking about housing affordability, things like that. You're talking about bringing in more students and how we do that, and basically how do we get people to have more kids is make them more affordable. And I think that's really one of the big challenges in the metro in this area is finding affordable quality childcare and having that quality childcare going through it's like 6th grade, like the age they found this 6th grade? Yeah. Having that going through 6th grade so that families can rely on that ability. And again, I do not think that the school district is a babysitter. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's the idea that there is quality staff providing that care for those families and things. So I don't know if that's something. I don't know. So
I don't know either, but it's a good forum to raise the question, and maybe that's something that Scott and I could try to dig into a little deeper. I'm a step behind Scott even on his understanding of that innovation piece, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I've got some catch up to play on.
It doesn't have to be something you're doing now, where if you collaborated, you would basically get a synergy and it would lower both organizations' costs. If we were both running daycare centers now and then we decided to run them together, it would lower our cost.
Yeah, I think that's a for sure thing. The alternative is maybe.
But if we made childcare, if we as a community did a community collaborative with the city, the school district, the churches, everybody and anybody, and said, we're going to take care of kids in the city of River Falls. And if you move daycare free in River Falls, we take care of kids. I don't know, we'd have to set that big goal and then figure out how do you get there. People would be lining up at the city limits to open it.
It's gonna be that's gonna be a quote right there on TikTok or something.
Good.
Daycare. Some really more house.
Liberal Allison Page.
I heard Scott Simpson say it. You know, this is an issue in every community in the state.
Yeah.
And if you want something really between a rock and a hard place, there are little districts in northern Wisconsin, especially in this state, where there is no daycare provider, period, in the community. And now there are options, school district going to 3-year-old kindergarten, because the community's coming forward and saying, will you help us with part of this? So there's 3-year-old kindergarten, all kinds of things. It's not unique to us, but if there are some ways that we can think about that, because it helps us do with our kids.
Yeah, it would attract people here.
Absolutely.
Also,
It would be a big community project.
yes, and businesses and the like, so.
I had something if I could. I had a resident contact me, and I promised him that I'd bring it up at this meeting. He lives in the neighborhood by the high school, and he's experiencing a lot of frustration. They're experiencing a lot of frustration, and then between, I think there's really two issues there, parking and speeding. And so my plea, I guess, is to figure out how we can together work to curtail that. I've talked to Kit Lickey about it. He's expressed to me that the biggest problem he faces is, and I won't get these numbers right, there's 350 parking spots at the high school and there's 412 kids that want permits, something like that. So there's that issue to solve. I think as a joint effort, we could talk with our school liaison officers if they can get a forum to talk at school assemblies about it or different things. I don't think the problem gets fixed easily, but certainly if we could find some way to help these young community members who maybe need a little guidance with how heavy to push that long skinny pedal and where to park. It's not happening every day, but there's a lot of residents who are experiencing people parking in front of mailboxes or in front of driveways. You know, those are a little easier to fix because you can ticket those or even call schools. But I think there's an effort there. I think it behooves both of us to find a solution to figure out how we solve this both short term and long term.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the board has heard this before, but I would affirm what Scott is saying is a very real problem, and I agree that we gotta try to work together on it. Yeah, we're not interested in saying it's your street, not ours, figure it out, and you're not interested in probably putting up no parking signs on every street over there either, and all kinds of options that we can consider. But it's part of being a good neighbor. Driving too fast is one thing. Yeah, it's just a constant flow, and I don't think any of us want to say, well, chose to build a house there, it's right next to a high school. What were you thinking? They weren't thinking that. And I agree that somehow we got to try to at least put a dent in the problem. I'm not sure what we can fix it.
And I'm not naive enough to think that we're going to solve it and they'll be parked in there, because there's going to be kids who go, all right, pay $40 a quarter or whatever it is to park there, park over here for free. I mean, there's still going to be those kids, and they're still going to be fast driving. But I think if we as a group can collaborate on something to show the residents that, hey, we're trying to find a solution. And I don't know what that is. You know, I don't know if there's a way to reconfigure some parking at the high school to allow students to park. I know on that the west side, I think that's mainly teachers. Is there room over there that they could park over there, take some of the pressure off? Is there a way that, like I said, the community liaison officers can get in front of the kids at an assembly and give them a little bit of a Dutch uncle speech about, you know, don't screw up over there. And, you know, I would look to law enforcement to figure out monitoring and things like that. I'm not trying to figure that out, but well, there's some hockey area that opens up the crossing of a busy street. But
I think there's some solutions. I think there's short-term solutions and long-term solutions. And I think we owe it to our residents, our taxpayers, the people who pay for this money we don't spend, to figure something out.
I agree.
We want to be good neighbors. Yeah, we're their neighbor, our high school right there. Try to address it, but you're right, not a quick fix, but.
What's traffic like, you know, capacity? I mean, you have less kids riding the bus than before, or is there more kids riding the bus? Do we have any clue on who must?
You're thinking in terms of the high school students.
Well,
You know, we run 2 routes in the morning. We run 2 routes.
That's it.
Yeah, no, meaning, excuse me, we run 27 different buses. 2 routes in the morning of 26 or 7 buses.
Okay.
And 2 routes in the afternoon of 26 or
Does that go to and from?
Are they jam-packed full? Not all of them, but.
The first route is high school, middle school. The second route, an hour later, is the elementary school.
Yeah, so the elementary is there.
26 buses that go to and from.
No, they just don't. Yes, well, sure. At some point,
All of our buses are in use 2 times every day,
Yeah.
in the morning and 2 times.
you saying, yes, one of the 26 bus routes, and it's usually end up in high school unless they transfer it to middle school, rather than, that.
You were associating the question with the parking problem.
I was just wondering.
More kids are driving.
Encourage more kids to take the bus instead of driving to school. I don't.
I think though, being important,
The driver yourself and behind the bus.
it's important for the city council to know that we're aware of the parking issue at the high school, and it is on the list of identified areas of concern in the district, that there are needs for more parking in high school, and also looking at the whole pattern of traffic that goes through there.
We don't have engineering here looking at hard surfaces, are we? Bad parking over there? Yeah, there's probably opportunities. That was one of the collaborations like, 5 or 6 years ago, where it was probably more than that now. It seems like it was that one. Where we connect, we had engineering for to the parking and circulation, and that's when they had connections. They connected the loops, and that's when we went to no right turns. And that seems to have helped some of the issues in the cemetery for sure.
Especially when beta sites.
Yes. I've experienced lack of being sometimes, but it's a surprising high level of self-aiding, because I think most people just now that makes sense that you can turn there.
It's easy to think of this as a convenience issue, and people just want to park close. It's really a public safety all the way around. It's about solutions, so we tell people to park at the hockey rink, as you say, it's across the state highway now.
We could bring up 5th grade patrol over and maybe.
Okay.
I want to mention one other thing too. Again, being connected with other school boards all across the state. Whenever I mention the fact that we meet annually with the city council, everybody goes, "Really? This is not common. It's not common." And most of them wish they could have a city council, which they could have school boards, but it's an indication of government in this community, and we appreciate city council or functional school board that talk to each other at least once a year. It's unique.
Yeah. Well, nobody else have anything? Otherwise, great having everybody here.
Thanks for hosting.
Well, that's next.
We'll talk pieces, just.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was interesting. I didn't. It's a.